All right, hello everybody. I want to talk about the underdeveloped civilized human. So I've been listening to a book on Audible called Sex at Dawn. It is wonderfully captivating. So much good information about sex and relationships. And I want to talk about the underdeveloped civilized human, because that's really what someone like a narcissist is. So let's talk about this. I got to start with the premise that the totally uncivilized human, thing like Aborigine, like back when we're swinging from branches, that kind of stuff. The evolutionary human being, the evolved ones who were able to reproduce successfully, our ancestors, their prerogatives are this. And so this is the preface, and what I'm going to say is that not everybody's like this, okay? There's multiple models of what our ancestors looked like and how our ancestors behaved and how they reproduced. One example was we all just fell in a pile and had orgies and swung from the trees and, had an all-out genital festival, with every full moon. So there's multiple models of this, multiple theories. This is just one, okay? So bear with me. But the model, I think, makes a lot of sense when you look at today's humans and you think about what past humans look like. To me, this is a pretty sensible model for consideration. So the model is, our ancestors who were successful at reproducing had a predisposition for certain behaviors. For the men, the predisposition was to secure a mate, to secure their progeny, that their genes, their DNA gets passed on. Secure a mate for that, ensure the raising and success of the children. But then also go spread your seed out with the occasional lady of the night, right? Sort of hedge your bets. You're gonna put most all your chips in with the whole family. But then what happens if you're out on the hunt and some other conquering peoples come along and kill your family, or saber-toothed tiger? There's a number of vulnerabilities that exist within the monogamy model, right? Because you've now bet the farm on one female, one family, etc., right? So what happens when that gets thrown into the ether? Well, that's a problem, because then you got to start over, but now you're old, right? So the ones who tended to have their genes passed on were the ones who both raised a family and went out spreading the old seed, bang, bang, skeet, skeet, yo. So they did both. The ladies who found security with a good providing male could make sure that their children were always provided for, cared for, well fed, and that they had all of the food and shelter and security resources they needed to be safe for the long duration task of raising children for 20 to 30 years. However, there's also the mindset of they may not have a good man that's good in all those things. They might not, right? They might have a man who's a good provider, but if you're in a gathering culture, picking berries does not protect you from a saber-toothed tiger. You say, oh girl, you got the good berry picker. Oh, well, you're totally going to be safe from predators. No, right? And on the other side of things, then you have, Captain Cock, who's 7'5" with a chest the size of a small house. Not always the most intelligent guy. He's great for protection and everything until he steps in a hole and falls and dies, right? I have this. I have a good example. There's a movie called The Other Guys, and it's a Will Ferrell movie. And you can look up this clip on YouTube. It's a clip from The Other Guys called Aim for the Bushes. And I think this is a perfect example of one of the fallacies of the alpha male. And one reason why, well, first of all, quote unquote, the alpha male, as people perceive it, because there's the guy who came up with the term he's got a TED talk where he specifically says he regrets using that term because everybody thinks it applies to humans and it doesn't. Not the way that it's been picked up, right? But we still use it. Anyways, I digress. So in The Other Guys, it's Samuel L. Jackson and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. They're the rough and tough cops. They're the tough guy, bad boy cops, right? And so there's this scene where they're chasing these criminals, and these criminals go up to the roof and they set up a zip line. They shoot a harpoon. They fly down the zip line and then they cut it. And so now The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson are left alone on this roof. All the bad guys are down on the street, packing up, getting away. And they look at each other and they say, "You thinking what I'm thinking? Aim for the bushes." And so they jump off the top of this huge building. And there are no bushes. They just splat. And they're dead. There's no bushes. And so I think there tends to be a perception that the quote alpha males, the ones who are physically superior, they have all the physically dominant traits. Sometimes they just don't see the world that's directly in front of them. They can be over cocky, overconfident, and get themselves ended in a really, really dumb way. Right? These are the guys whose last words are, "Hold my beer, watch this." Right? So there's something to be said about what's a girl to do. Do I go with Captain Berry Picker or do I go with Captain Cock? Well, from the girl's perspective, they go with the berry picker for security, but sometimes that ain't everything. So in the jungle, it might make sense during ovulation. She don't want a relationship, but she might very well want a more physically superior progeny in the brood of children as sort of a fallback, a plan B. What happens if Captain Berry Picker dies? Well, at least then I've got a strapping young man of a son who can help defend the home, right? So all of this equates to the ones who, the humans that had, the term is successful copulation. The humans who had successful copulation and who defined our base ancestry gene pool were these two types. The men who secured a mate to guarantee that his DNA survives and gets passed on, his legacy continues, but who also went out and said bang bang skeet skeet girl. And these are the guys who towards the end of their life, they've lived their lives, they've got their kids are grown up, they still have seed to shoot, so they run and they go shoot some at some of the younger girls who are young adults. And it's with the idea of, if they get pregnant, I may not be around, but she's pretty enough where she ought to be fine and eventually find a berry picker. And from the female perspective, though, the females that survived the most were the ones that stayed with Captain Berry Picker, but also went out and broke off a piece of Captain Cock and had that progeny there in the mix. So you have like 3 skinny children and then 1 giant child, right? I don't know what happened. Well, it makes total sense. You must be really good at picking berries. that kind of thing. Back then, they didn't really care so much. You know, they weren't as
estimated time in traffic 7 minutes.
They weren't as selfish as we are today. And I hate to use the term selfish. So all of that leads up to this. This is the model for under-civilized human beings, because in today's world, we barely even have a need for relationships, like a survival need. Like, it's been just such a complete brick wall, hard 180-degree turn quickly, where all the things that we needed to do to survive as a species, suddenly we just don't even need to do anymore. Can you imagine doing something the same way for years and all of a sudden just, whoop, nope. Right? Just within the last few hundred years, it's changed quite a bit. It's no longer a major challenge to not die by the millions. You know? So there's been a hard left turn. And quite a few of us are able to adapt, but quite a few of us are not. And some parts of society are adapting to this faster and better than others. And as a result, you end up with this mix of people who come from a lineage that are easily accepting of change, that have the ability to change. And then there's some parts of our gene pool that are not so inclined to being able to change like that. And so what's the result? You end up seeing members of our society that still display this kind of behavior. The men who secure a family and have their children, but go off and have the occasional fling with a little young 18, 19, 20-year-old girl who means nothing to him, and then she gets knocked up and he's like, well, I don't care, bye. That's where that model comes from. Same thing with the women who are getting an established relationship. They have the quote-unquote beta male provider. They have the husband who says, bye, honey, kisses her on his way out the door with the briefcase, and he gets into the Honda Accord 4-door with the baby seats, or Mustang GT with baby seats, and goes off to work and leaves his family home. And then as soon as he's gone, she goes running over to Captain Cock down the street because she's ovulating. And then that's how he ends up with one kid that looks a little different. So I'm still going through this book, and the book doesn't directly draw up this comparison. I don't think, at least not in a part that I've gotten to yet. But just as I'm listening to all this stuff about pre-civilized humans and all the various theories, because they cover more than just this one. This one seems to me to make a lot of sense when you frame it like that. So when you come into contact with someone like a narcissist, we already know they're an underdeveloped person. They have deficits in emotional expression. They have deficits in whole object relations. They have deficits in object constancy. They have deficits in empathy. They have deficits, nothing but deficits. They are underdeveloped. They're underdeveloped. And when you're underdeveloped and you're from some of this gene pool, and you don't have the natural inclinations to be able to adapt and to accept new change pretty quick, you're gonna see behaviors of underdeveloped humans in an underdeveloped human, right? You're gonna have plenty of time for living in a van down by the river when you're living in a van down by the river. You're gonna find characteristics of underdeveloped humans in an underdeveloped human. Ta-da! Make sense? And so from this standpoint, it's really easy to be angry. It's really easy to be frustrated and bitter and everything like that. But on the other hand, you got to recognize the predator for what they are. You know, the people that run and hop into a panda enclosure to hug a panda and they get mauled, dumbass, right? You should have known the animal for its animal behavior. And that's how we all ended up here. We didn't understand the animal for the animal behavior. We didn't know it. So thank you very much. I'll see you on the next video.